Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, trees and shrubs, I'm sorry to inform you there is no new mask video for this week. Which is why I'm going to just go ahead and do next week's now. Now let me check the crystal ball to see what mask I should talk about. Mystic spirits of the crystal ball, tell me, ow. That was sharp. What? Oh, hey, this isn't a crystal ball. This is one of those brain drilling devices. Stupid zombie dwarfs. Sometimes they're just not, you know, as the tall man himself would tell you, it's hard to get good help these days. However, this does clue me in as to what mask we should talk about today. And if you know me, you may know that I like just about all the horror characters and the monsters and the scary villains and such, but one that has always been a special, particular favorite of mine is the Tall Man, as played by Angus Scrimm in a total of 5 Phantasm movies. And if you haven't seen them, that first one, wow, from the late 70s, there is nothing else like it before or since. I think more than any other movie, it really followed the feel of a dream. You know, it feels like there's plot progression and story being told, even though there isn't really. It's just kind of arbitrary, but it's so atmospheric and moody, and it really captures the feeling of a dream where you're trying to follow the logic, but you can't quite get there from inside your head. Memorable movie and utterly unique and unlike the other movies being made at the time. Now, let me back up and do a little history. Time for a little history before we get into the mask. A little history. So that in mind, you don't need to keep looking at me for the next couple of minutes. If you want to go ahead and check to see if your shoes are tied or your ties are shoed, or you want to have a sandwich, or how about a bowl of cereal? Have some Fruit Loops or Apple Jacks, or you know, don't have Rice Krispies though, because they make noise, and then you won't be able to hear me giving you the history that's about to follow. By the way, for all you Rice Krispie lovers out there, keep in mind, if they go snap, crackle, pop, those are good, fresh Rice Krispies, and you should feel okay in eating them. If, however, you pour the milk on them and they go pock, snaggle, crap, those are past their freshness date. I wouldn't eat those. Where were we? Oh yes, history. Now for a bit of history. In the year 1881, Chester Arthur became the 21st President of the United States. And from that time until 1885, what? What do you mean no? He did too. Oh, you mean don't go back that far in history? Okay. We'll just go back to the 80s. How about that? The 1980s instead of the 1880s. Okay, so I missed it by a century. So sue me. You know, the 1980s did indeed give me and Laura the great opportunity to get to know the guy who played the Tall Man, Angus Scrimm, and he was wonderful. He was such a good guy. He was very educated and very articulate, more so than I am, I think. Very articulate and well-read and polite and friendly and kind, and he was just a great guy. Nothing like the completely, irredeemably, totally malevolent and unsympathetic character that he played in those scary movies. But the thing is, Laura and I did not know him when we saw the first movie, the one from the late 70s. We didn't know him when we saw the 1979 movie, which is good because it means that movie got to just enchant us and work its magic on us as it's supposed to. But by the time of the second movie, Phantasm 2, I guess that follows. That would be the title of the second one, wouldn't it? By the time of Phantasm 2, we did know him. And that one was unique in the series because it's the only one that was financed by a big movie studio and had all that studio interference. I mean, publicity. Yeah. And had a big premiere on Hollywood Boulevard and all that stuff. The second one, way after, like a decade after the original. Finally, they got around to the second one. But it's a little strange, that second one. It's got a different actor playing the lead character, not the villain, but the lead character, Mike. And those of us who were used to the movie from 1979 were looking at it like, who is that guy? It was a guy that looks kind of like Brad Pitt. But the studio imposed that on the makers of Phantasm 2 because they thought he looked like a movie star. They thought the guy who plays Mike doesn't. But the fans are out there saying, we don't know who that is, but you, sir, are not Mike, we were saying, because he looks so different. But anyway, the original Mike from the 1979 movie did in fact go back to playing the part in Phantasms 3, 4, and 5. So part 2 stands out a little for that reason. It's a little odd. It also had the biggest budget and the biggest elaborate special effects and the most elaborate sets and all that stuff. And it's not the best movie ever made, but I still would recommend it as a good time of something that's just scary and weird and nightmarish and cool. And we did indeed get to see that big Hollywood Boulevard premiere, and there were tons of people there, and a hearse pulled up, and Angus got out with his suit on as the Tall Man. And I never forgot this, because who would? You wouldn't. He got out of the hearse, and a big crowd of people in front of the theater on Hollywood Boulevard. He saw me and Laura, and the first thing he said was, "David and Laura," and came right to us. And I think he did that just to give us a boost, a thrill, a moment, you know. So tons of people were there thinking, who's that guy and that girl that he knows? They must be somebody important. And now, of course, everyone knows we weren't. But at the time, it was amazing that he immediately was like, David and Laura, came to us. But anyway, he was a great guy. We got to, we had him in our apartment a few times. We went to his house a few times. I have video somewhere on an old VHS tape of him wishing Laura's brother Richard happy birthday in character, saying, boy, filmed in my apartment on old VHS camera. And he invited us over to dinner, so we've had dinner prepared by the Tall Man, so that's cool. Again, he was super nice and kind and very talkative, you know. You could really get to know him. He was friendly. I remember his favorite movie of the Universal series, the Universal Classics, happened to be Son of Frankenstein from 1939. He liked that better than he did the first two Frankenstein movies. And he had an old VHS tape of Son of Frankenstein. And of course, we had seen it before, but we watched it at his place with him, and that was cool. We watched Mark of the Vampire, which back then was not as common. It was kind of a rare movie then. We watched Mark of the Vampire with Bela Lugosi and Carol Borland, who introduced forevermore pretty much what dead chicks look like. Yeah. But we watched that at his house, and anyway, he was great, and we were so sad when he died. He was getting up there in Earth years, and nobody expected he'd be in another 20 movies or anything. But anyway, in terms of masks, there have been several Tall Man masks over the years. I actually had the first one. It was a strange creation by R. Quinn Studios, and I still remember I was in Morris Costumes in Charlotte, North Carolina, and looking at this big, wonderful wall of masks, all these different masks for sale, and there were all the masks that were current, things from Don Post and Be Something, and I think Savage Eye they had, and a lot of great masks. And I saw this guy who had this little underbite with the lower teeth showing, and I asked Phil Morris, what is that mask of the guy doing the little skull with his lower teeth? And I remember him saying, oh, that's a guy from some movie called Phantasm. And I thought, wow, I thought that was him, and I had to have it. So I actually had an R. Quinn Phantasm mask, R. Quinn Studios Phantasm mask. And if you look at the movie Frightmare, okay, there have been like 4 movies called Frightmare. If you look at the one also called The Horror Star, which had Ferdinand Maine in it and Jeffrey Combs in it. If you look at that movie, they used a lot of Forrest J. Ackerman's collection to represent the collection of this horror fan club. And you can see one of the R. Quinn Studios Phantasm masks of Angus in there. And as for mine, I used it in various haunted houses and scenes. It made a great mad scientist because nobody, you know, outside of the hardcore fans would recognize it. So it made a good sort of stand-in for Dr. Frankenstein because it just looked like an intense, mean kind of guy. Interestingly, the R. Quinn Studios Tall Man had that salt and pepper yak hair like a lot of Don Post masks had back then, which is to say it was predominantly brown with a little white, but it was not a gray-haired mask because it was based on the first movie in which his hair was darker. And it was pretty deluxe. It was small because it was based on life cast. It was very small. I don't think I ever tried to put it on my head. It was small and it had tiny little pupil eye cuts for the pupils. I don't know if I could have actually worn it. I don't think so. But it had punched inserted hair on the top. It had glued on hair on the sides, but on top the Arquin one had some inserted hair. But anyway, there have been a bunch of masks of the character over the years, and I've owned a couple of others, one by John Fuller, and I think 2 different versions sculpted by Jeff Wehinkle. But the one we're going to talk about today came out from Trick or Treat Studios in 2020. Oh geez, was it 3 or 4? Yeah, 24 I think. The one of the Tall Man from Phantasm. And let me tell you the story about fixing it up a bit. And if you have one, here's some things you might want to think about to spruce it up. Now this is just right out of the bag, okay? And he looks half in the bag, but he's right out of the bag actually. I like this a lot. The tag on here is super cool because it's got a little tiny reproduction of the poster from the first movie. Look at that, a little movie poster on the tag. I love it when they do that. Anyway, this one came out and I've heard a lot of hate online because a lot of the collectors were disappointed with this, but I believe it's the first officially licensed, like production style mask ever done of this character. And I've got a hanging droopy and I don't want to do that because I don't want to make it look worse than it is and you know, unfairly knock it. I don't want to cheat. But there are some things wrong with it. And when you get a mask that has some things that are disappointing, basically I felt like I have maybe 4 options. One is I Google to find the nearest town that still uses parking meters, drive there with the mask, leave it on a parking meter and drive back home. The second option would be to dig a trench along Highway 4 and throw it into the trench and set it on fire. Well, I'll do that. The third option is the most popular, which is to go online and complain that a mask you got for 50 bucks doesn't look as good as one that sells for $500. Or the fourth thing, and this is the one I liked, which is, what could I do to make it look a little better? What could I do to make myself like it more? And you can do that too. Just think, well, what's wrong with it? What don't I like about it? What didn't come out like they hoped? Okay, I think a problem here is that in order to make this wearable, they had to make it kind of big because they didn't want me to say what I just said about the Arquin one, you know, that I don't think I could get it on my head. This is big enough to wear, but the fact that it's got sculpted, molded, painted hair makes the face, can you see that? It requires the face to go back in an unnatural way. And what you get is too wide and too full and too fat of a face. And this is the Tall Man, you know, not Jake and the Fat Man. Did they ever do a mask of, was that William Conrad, I think, wasn't it? I don't think they've done a mask of him. They should, because, you know, it would be canon. Hey! Yeah, there's the Tall Man mask. I didn't like this shape, and I didn't like the fact that, now this is just me, this part. I don't like molded, sculpted, painted hair. I like real hair. I make a few exceptions for old-fashioned things that are meant to be retro and or kitschy. You know, some of the old masks like early Topstones and Don Posts and stuff. Once in a while, I'm okay with that. But if it's supposed to look like a real character or a movie prop, I really don't like painted on hair. So, and let me bring out one that Laura and I worked on, and let me take you through some tips. This is one, I guess it makes more sense over this way, huh? Because this is before and after. Yeah. Now, the first thing I did, and this is what you would want to do before we get into the hair business, is I thought this looked too wide, and the fact that his face has to go straight back and then out into the hair, that doesn't look natural. It doesn't look real to me. Especially since he's a little bit ghouly in those movies. He's not horrifically, supremely made up with a lot of caked on gray and white and blue and all that. Just a little bit. He does have a little bit of shading and highlighting to make him look a little bit deathly and creepy, like I look normally. Okay, so if you can see there, what I have chosen to do is greatly accentuate that shadow on the side of the face that goes from just in back of his chin, back up his jaw and under his cheekbone, because this looks like too much face to me. This looks more like the shape of his face and like a natural face. So take some dark paint if you're able to, if you are able to do that, and color that in pretty heavily, pretty dark along there. And I tried doing it with more subtlety, using a paint color that was closer to the skin color. Wasn't enough. I found that I had to make it pretty heavy on those sides, on the jaws, in order to get it to where I thought it really looked creepy and ghouly enough and made his face look thin enough. And as you can see, when you shadow that in under the cheeks, it does indeed make his face look thinner and more drawn to the front and more like a natural face and more like he really looked. The other thing is those lines on the forehead. I gave those more paint, and I looked at movie stills to do this and saw the way that they really looked in the movies and on his face in real life, and from the stills that were used to create the sculpture. And you need to accentuate those a little bit. When his face is mostly almost the entire thing that's done in the same color, it suffers for it. He looks a little too just bland. It looks a little too bland, but you need more contrast in there to look creepy. I gave him just a little bit more paint on the lips because I wanted him to be a different color from the rest of the shading. Okay, and that particular shortcoming is a fault of an unavoidable problem with production situations where you need to get a lot of copies of the mask out. Sometimes they cut down on the number of colors used, whereas I'm doing it at home and nobody knows if I took forever on it. I can change paint colors as many times as I want to. So I redid his lips and I redid his eyes because I thought those eyes look painted on to me. They look kind of phony and kind of dead. And I didn't do anything to the sculpture or anything like that. I just repainted them and I gave them a little bit of red rims going on. And I made the irises blue because he had blue eyes. And as far as the hair, here's an important fact for you would-be hair-it-yourselfers. You might be thinking, oh, well, covering over molded hair with real hair must be easy because you just put it exactly where it is. Actually, in some ways, it's trickier than doing a hair job from scratch on a bald-headed sculpt. And Laura haired this one fantastically, I think. And you could use any of a number of different colors and shades because his hair color changes from movie to movie. I think this mask looks like Phantasm 2 or 3. And one of the reasons I think that is because the paint color they chose is gray for the hair. And as previously mentioned in the first one, his hair was browner, and by the time of the fifth one, it was white as snow. It was totally white, and it was shorter. So I don't think this is from the fifth movie. I think 2 and 3 is what we're talking about. Now, one of the other things that helps with the hair, oh, and I should mention, Laura blended this from a mix of gray and black and white fibers mixed until it looked like this. And this particular color mix, Laura chose because it looks pretty close to the paint color that they used on the mask at Trick or Treat. It's a little less blue, but that's because it's not paint, it's actual hair on there. But she made it pretty close to the same gray value, let's say, as that of the mask, so that we're not changing it up too drastically. We're keeping it faithful to Trick or Treat's concept of what the mask should look like and should represent. So that's why it was done that way. Now, one problem here that you may notice, for some reason his hair is molded in such a way that it kind of goes back. That not only, it doesn't look like his hair is hanging naturally unless he's looking up at something, and when you're called the tall man, you don't do a lot of looking up, you look down on everybody, see? But the other problem with that is it makes that weird shapeless sides of the face thing more noticeable because the hair goes back. And actually, in real life, his hair hangs down more. So the only thing Laura changed in terms of the hairline, this is all glued exactly where it is on the painted version, but she brought that hair down at the bottom forward just a little. Let me show the other side because the tag might be in the way for you kids at home viewing this. Okay, see that? It doesn't go back as far on this one. She brought it forward. That not only makes it look a little more like he looks in the movies and in real life, it makes it look a little more natural, like it's hair that's just hanging down rather than somehow blown back and glued back or something like it looks when you don't do that. So that helped, and it makes the face a little thinner from the front, which also helps make it look more like dear old Angus, I think. So those are some things you might want to consider. The eyebrows are a little darker. Laura put real hair on the eyebrows, but a darker mix, because most of the time humans and monsters from other dimensions and other planets and such typically have eyebrows a little bit darker than the hair on their heads. So she got a little more black going on in the blend for his eyebrows. But I think that looks really cool, and I think that took it the rest of the way that it needed to make it really look like Angus Scrimm as the Tall Man from the Phantasm movies. And here's another story you might not find interesting. One time he gave me, I told you he was a nice guy. He was such a nice guy. He gave me a little tie tack that's exactly like the one he wears in those movies. And he's like, I thought you might like this. And wow, are you kidding? I was in horror nerd heaven. I thought that was amazing. It's the Tall Man's tie tack. I love it. And he said something like, don't get excited. It's not a real jewel. It's just a cheap plastic thing that they liked how it photographed on camera, and it's just a piece of plastic. I didn't care. You know, to me it was as good as if it had been a real jewel. I thought it was great. And here's the punchline to that is that I have worn a black tie with the Tall Man's tie tack on it to every funeral I have attended since that day. And basically the people whose funerals I have attended would have loved it that I had the Tall Man's tie tack on there. One time it came off at a restaurant after a funeral, and I was hysterical to find it. It rolled under the table somewhere, and you know, people at the next table probably saying, Mommy, why is that man like that? Because I'm like, I gotta crawl around the floor and find the tie tack, like it was a diamond or something. But and it was just a little piece of plastic jewel. But so glad that I found it and that I had it. And let me tell you, if I end up coming to your funeral, I will probably be wearing the Tall Man's tie tack on there. But the reason it fell off at the restaurant is the little geschwutz came off the back. That you know, this little thing you squeeze on you and you put it in. Yeah, that thing came loose and fell down my jacket, and then the tie tack rolled under the table, and I was like, nobody move, don't step on. You know, you see like in old movies, people are like, my contact lens, nobody move, you'll break it. I was like that with the Tall Man's tie tack, but happily I still have it. Yes, and I think it's fantastic that he would just give a guy like me I thought you might like this. Wow, really? Because I would have never known what his tie tack looked like exactly or where they got it. He said it just came from some craft store, and like I said, he said, don't get excited, it's not a real jewel, it's a cheap plastic thing. But it does have an interesting look to it, kind of a red with a iridescent bluish cast going on. So it was chosen for the way it photographs. And if I still have mine, if I don't lose it somewhere through my own ineptitude, I'll wear it to your funeral if I'm invited. Okay, but there you have it, a little refresher course or corpse on how to spruce up a commercial mask and make it look a little more movie authentic. And as for that color that I used under his cheeks and around his eyes and stuff, the shadow color, I've seen masks of the Tall Man shaded with like gray and black and bluish gray. I thought that was too harsh because, again, I saw him in person and I saw how he came to the premiere of Part 2 and all that. He didn't have a lot of dead, ghouly, zombie, vampire looking makeup going on. It was just kind of a dark flesh, but it wasn't brown. So I don't know what this is going to look like on your monitor or with the weird lighting here in a horror hotel, but what I have endeavored to come up with is something I would call plum, okay? And I mixed it up by adding brown and purple and then white. So it's like a color of a plum, but paler. It's kind of the color of a bruise. But plum is the best name for the color. And if you spend too long mixing it up and mixing and mixing and remixing and don't like the color and it takes you forever, that's what's known as getting plum tuckered out. Anyway, you can still get the Tall Man mask from Trick or Treat as of this video recording, and I highly recommend giving it a little TLC, by which I mean, that's right, Tall Man level creepiness, which you do by adding real hair over the molded hair and adding heavier shading and detailing to the paint, and you can really make him come to life. Do we want that? Not sure we want him to really come to life, do we? You see Laura's fine hair work on making it look just like the mask. And when you're gluing hair over molded hair, you have to put it on there as thin as you can get away with. Don't bulk it up, because you don't want him to have a lot bigger looking head like he's got tons of hair. You have to slick it down pretty flat and make sure you have enough to just completely cover all the surface, but not bulk it out any more than is absolutely necessary. You with me? No, you're not with me. I'm here at Horror Hotel and you're wherever you are. But I hope you'll be with me again next week, and I hope I'll be here again next week with another horrible monster. And the last thing I have to say is bye!